Welcome back to Archaeology After Dark, everyone. I'm your host, Daniel Rhodes. My guest today is Erina Basci. Erina, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Daniel. It's really excited to be on a podcast and to get the opportunity to talk about archaeology in grad school with some folks.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a grad student. I'm currently at the University of Michigan. I'm in my sixth year of my PhD. My research focuses geographically in the Balkans. Right now, my research is focused in Kosova, but broadly, I'm interested in the Balkans, Albania, Kosovo, and the countries around it. Temporally, I'm interested in the late Bronze to early Iron Age, which in this part of the world is roughly 1450 BC to about 800 BC. And my research questions are anchored around mobility, settlement, and land use. I'm exploring these questions in my dissertation currently via these fortified hill fort sites that dot the region that I work, the region of Dukajin. And I'm using these sites as a way of trying to understand how people may have moved within this broader landscape, trying to understand what role these sites had in channeling, influencing settlement, movement, mobility, and connectivity in the region. So that's me in a nutshell.
So, what made you pick this as an area of study? What drew you to it?
Um, I get this question often because many people are like, "Oh, what brought you to Kosova and the Balkans?" It's a little out there. For me, my research in some ways is a bit of a coming home. I'm an immigrant, a first generation immigrant, first generation grad student. I was born in Albania, and my family immigrated to Canada when I was very young. And I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be an archaeologist. And not only that, but I wanted to be an archaeologist back home. So what got me into archaeology was a desire to come back and study the prehistory of Albania, and that's how I kind of wound up working in Kosovo. I was originally interested in Albania, but Kosovo is a small country composed of almost entirely Albanian people. Just to the north, we share a border. I found the country fascinating, its prehistory beautiful, and this is kind of how I ended up working here.
Yeah, I looked at the region geographically. It's a very interesting section, not just archaeologically, but historically also. So much has, happened in the area around it, like Sarajevo and places like that are spotlighted a lot in recent history.
Hmm. Yeah, well, Kosovo itself also has a kind of a turbulent recent history as well. Not to dive or diverge too much into it, but it is Europe's youngest country. It has a recent past of a very violent war. And the people here faced a very brutal regime under when it was a part of Yugoslavia under the Milosevic regime. So it's very, very complicated. And I won't get too much into it because it
Yeah, we're here
requires
to have
its
fun,
own
not talk
time. Yeah,
geopolitics.
yeah, exactly. But it's worth mentioning, it's worth highlighting. I always mention it because we do study the past, but we're archaeologists working in the present. So we can't escape those things. So it's worth mentioning ever so briefly.
Yeah, of course. So back to the fun part of this program, the always fun
Yeah.
part of this program. What has been the most valuable thing you've taken away from being a grad student?
Um, I've very much enjoyed the grad student experience. Obviously, it has its ups and downs. I consider myself very lucky to have the privilege to go to one of the best programs in the country. And something that I really think has been really beneficial to me is that I've had the chance to kind of design my own research questions and design my own project and lead my own project, which is not something that everybody gets to do. And I think that has been probably one of the greatest assets and one of the things that I've enjoyed the most, even though it has many challenges.
So, for those students who are getting into grad school and they're trying to find their way through a program, how did you design your research question?
That's a great question. I mean, not everybody has an area of research that they're interested in or a specific research question that they're interested in when they apply to grad school, and that's okay. That's something that you can kind of hash out with your advisor. One thing to think about and like as a first step when you're looking at programs is to find an advisor whose research yours can fit well in, or if that they're, that they understand your research. And that played a very big role actually in why I ended up going to Michigan and why I work in Kosova, because my advisor works in Kosova, and that has been very, very helpful for me because as an internet, like it's difficult for a grad student, for example, to get a permit to work overseas. You know what I mean? So having an advisor that works in the area really, really helps. That's familiar with the area, that's familiar with the record. Um, is very, very beneficial. So I guess that's part one. But in terms of like selecting the questions, it's really what inspires you and what drives you. And I've always been interested in mobility, maybe because of my own life trajectory as an immigrant. I think it's really fascinating the lengths at which people move across a landscape. And it's something that I think is very much a part of the human condition. We're really good at moving. So I think that fascination and my own kind of life trajectory is what kind of inspired my research questions and in regards to mobility back here in the Balkans.
Right on. So you got your research question, you're putting things together. What's the next step after that?
It depends on program to program. You will take classes, you will pass prelims, and then you start spending almost all your time writing grants, which is not so glamorous and not so fun, but it is integral. Um, I spent so much of like my time in between classes looking for and writing grant applications and rewriting and editing. But that is, I guess, just the nature of the game. You need to fund your research. Um, there's usually a mix of internal and external grants. What I did is I did a short pilot season many years ago that I was able to fund with only internal grants, which is great. And then with the data that I gathered from my pilot seasons, I was able to sort of aim for bigger grants, and having a little bit of data to incorporate into those larger grant applications really helped, because it shows like, hey, I know what I'm doing. I've been at the site. I have an idea of what's there. I've really thought about my questions. So give me some money so I can go back and really explore these questions.
Now, Arena brings up a really great point, people. When you're getting through graduate school, or if you're working at a place like a museum or a laboratory or somewhere like that, being able to actually write a grant is something very few people actually know how to do. So, if you want to stand out, having a grant writing skill or background can be invaluable.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And don't feel like you need to reinvent the wheel. A lot of these grants are very boilerplate. Ask people to see their grants. That's how I like formulated and wrote my NSF. I reached out to a colleague that whose research I really admired. I'm like, can I please look at your grant application? She said, of course, here you go. I read hers and I used it as a template for mine. You don't have to reinvent the wheel for these grants. Reach out to people, tap into your networks, talk to your colleagues, edit each other's work. You really shouldn't be doing this alone. You know what I mean? Obviously, the ideas and the writing is your own, but you can get help in the process.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to think outside the box where you go to for grants. Like, large corporations, nonprofit organizations that, relate or don't necessarily relate to what you're doing, they can somewhat fund your research if you're willing to, phrase it just a little differently.
Exactly. And if you don't ask, the answer is no. So
Yeah, don't be afraid to go ask people for money.
you got to do what you got to do.
All right, so what's the next step? Say you've gotten funded, you've got your research question all put together. I assume you start packing up and heading out into the field at that point.
Yeah, pretty much. You pack up all your stuff. You bring a couple good trowels. Depending on where you work, it can be hard to get certain materials. So usually one of my luggage is just full of like tools, like heavy duty bags, a couple Marshall Towns, and stuff like that. And then you kind of head into the field, you assemble your team, and you'd be surprised once you get started, things get rolling, you'd be surprised how much time, how many different caps you wear. You're no longer just a grad student. You are the project manager, you are the field nurse, like you are everything all the time. And I found what I found surprising was how little archaeology I did often when I was in the field. I was often like managing, organizing, keeping track of lists of people, of vehicles, of receipts for reimbursement. That's something that like I hadn't really thought that much of. Like I was super excited to go out into the field, and start digging, but I think I like touched a trowel like twice this season just because I didn't have, which was really sad because obviously as an archaeologist, I love excavating and I love being in the field. And I really only got to like go in once or twice when we had a lull. But most of my time I was just kind of running around and just running logistics. And that was, I guess, a little surprising to me, but it makes sense.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I don't think people think about when they start doing a project or they're putting a project together is the logistics of it all, making sure all your people are in the right place, making sure everyone's on the same schedule, same page, both literally and philosophically, because, people lose things in their inboxes and don't always get the information.
Exactly. And there's just so much paperwork that I didn't even think of. And keeping tracks of receipts was the most annoying part. And just because you if you lose it, you don't get reimbursed. But yeah, you have a crew that's dependent on you. And not only I work almost entirely with students. I know people in different parts of the world do things differently. I like working with students because it provides them an opportunity to learn new techniques, specifically undergrads. But working with undergrads also comes with its own challenges. One thing that, you're in charge of their safety, you're in charge of their education, you're like kind of like the field mom. You have to make sure everybody's safe and taken care of. And another thing that people will sometimes forget is, mental health in the field. It can be super challenging, especially if it's somebody's first time out there. I'm bringing these kids out here. Obviously, they're all from Kosova. They know the language, they know the culture, so they're not dealing with culture shock or anything. But I'm trekking them up mountains, so there's these things to be considered. You got to make sure everybody's aware of what they're getting themselves into and taken care of, that you're available if they need anything, accommodating to their physical needs, mental health needs, things like that, that again, you don't think about. But, students may have dietary restrictions. There, again, if you have international students come in, there may be cultural shock or different conversations you need to have about just, respect and things like that.
It could also be something obvious like a language barrier, like, if you're not speaking a local dialect in, say, a certain region of a country, there's going to be a communication error and you need to have, another person, or worst case scenario, an outdated translating book.
Yeah, exactly. Thank God we live in the tech age. We got like Google on our phone. We can
Oh,
just like
thank
quickly
yes.
speak into it. Yeah.
Yes, it made it so I didn't necessarily have to take a language course in graduate school, even though I really should.
It helps. It helps to know another language. That's why like I'm very lucky. I speak Albanian, and Albanian is the main language here, but there's also multiple different ethnicities in the area, there's different people. So there's cases, for example, we're working near a neighborhood where it's predominantly Serbian. One of my students spoke Serbian, which was great, and that helped when we needed to communicate. But again, it helps to know a language or two and keep that in mind.
Yeah, guys, if you're going to be studying in a foreign country or an outside country, make sure to at least learn the basics of the language. I'm not saying that you necessarily have to be fluent. You can work on it as you go, but at least,
Mhm.
the courtesies like hello and thank you.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Like especially if you're a foreigner making your career in a different country, you should make an effort to learn the language. Because it's a lot of you really shouldn't put the emphasis on your collaborators to communicate with you. You need to put, I think, equal effort to communicate with them in their language. So yes, take a class. You don't have to be perfect, but you will learn as you go.
Yeah, you don't have to be perfect. That is something that, we cannot stress enough to students, that it drives them crazy saying, oh, my writing isn't perfect. My advisor is going to kill me or something like that. You don't have to be perfect. You are still learning because your title is graduate student. You are
Mhm.
still learning. It is a process.
Exactly. And here's like a little fun anecdote on that. In my research statement or maybe personal statement, I can't remember, to Michigan, I spelled archaeology wrong and I still got in. Like ridiculous, but you know what I mean? It goes to show you that like don't stress the small stuff. It'll be okay. I misspelled archaeology on my personal statement and I'm here. I'm
Yeah,
still alive.
I talked to someone the other day. We were putting together a public program, and we still misspell things like on, documents that we're getting ready to send out for the public to read. And I didn't even notice that I had misspelled necessary. I still have a problem spelling it.
Yeah, some words are just tricky.
It's
Just
one of
it's
those
okay.
things.
Give yourself grace.
That's why I'm glad for spell check.
Spell check is great. It really is. It's a lifesaver.
It really is. And, as students, it makes us look better when we submit things for review.
Yes. Also, I don't know if y'all have used Grammarly or heard of it. That has saved my life so many times. It's like a little free add-on. It just fixes like it catches things that maybe Word doesn't and helps with your grammar, which I suck at grammar. It's my weak point. So there's tools out there. Your writing doesn't have to be perfect. You just got to be willing to put in the effort and revise. And there's tools out there that will help you. So
Yeah, don't be afraid to go back and question what you've written down. Like, does it sound good to you? Yeah. So get someone else to read it too. And if it sounds good to them, go from there.
exactly, exactly.
So, what other challenges have you had working in the field or putting your project together?
Um, I think one of the things is just like maybe goes without saying, or maybe it's so obvious that people don't think about it, is just like physical exhaustion. It can be very demanding, especially where I work. My sites are hill forts, so they're uh, usually elevated. So the physical exhaustion can kind of get to you working 30 days straight, you know. Um, but that kind of just comes with the territory. Right now, the biggest hurdle I'm facing is actually analyzing all my findings. I've got so much pottery, and I'm not a pottery person. So I just have so much pottery and not enough time. So that's my next hurdle. Just figuring out how I will handle that and how I will maximize the time that I have to get the analysis that I need done.
So, let me ask you this. You're in Albania, so I'm assuming you're working with either a lab or a university there to put your project together.
I'm in Kosova, so but the project that I work on, so like I said earlier, grad students can't get permits, so I work under my advisor's permit. So my advisor, we have an MOU with the Archaeological Institute here in Kosova. We have a joint project that's going on, and my research is folded under that permit. So yeah, we international entities don't just come in and do research. Like in the old days of Schliemann, you have to have an understanding, you have to have a local collaborator, and you have to really put an emphasis on collaboration with some sort of entity like the Archaeological Institute, collaboration with different archaeologists in the institute, and then collaboration with students. So I mentioned earlier, I work almost exclusively with students, and they're undergrads here at the University of Pristina. So yes, I don't just kind of come in and be like, I'm here. I work with local archaeologists, students, and the Archaeological Institute.
So you don't take the Schliemann approach and just come in and start blasting things here and there. And say that you found the city of Troy.
That's not really my style. It worked for Schliemann, sort of, but
Yeah,
not my style.
the best thing is there are laws that prevent that kind of approach now.
Yes. See, progress, you know.
Yeah.
Obviously things could always be better, but slow progress.
So again, this goes without saying, do not go to a foreign country, say you're an archaeologist, and take the Schliemann approach and start blasting things here and there. That's not copacetic.
No, do not recommend. Do things the right way. It takes time, but do it the right way. And also, if you're going to work in a foreign country, this kind of reminds me that like put some effort into learning the local cultural heritage laws. Look at the permitting process. Do a little bit of research. Don't just kind of show up and be like, I'm here, you know. If you're gonna, if again, you're a foreigner, you need to understand how things work in the country that you're going to.
Yeah, and that just doesn't go for archaeologists. That should be taken into account when you travel anywhere. You don't have to be, working in this country. You could just be visiting for a few days. Take the time to learn what you need to know to not necessarily blend in because people are going to spot that you're a tourist one way or another. But
Mhm.
take the time to immerse yourself.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, we have the internet. You can do a quick Google search, but there's books. I think it's important to learn a little bit about the country where you're going, research or not. So you can be like, culture, respectful of the culture that you're going to be immersed in. So yes, doing a little bit of research can go a long way.
Now that actually does apply to graduate school, undergrad. Do the research. Don't just blindly go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, yeah. And as grad students, we've got access to like so many different directories, articles, books, libraries. So the resources are there.
So, Arena, any last minute things you want to throw out before we wind the episode down?
Um, I know I talked a little bit about obstacles, but I don't mean that to deter anyone. It's really a privilege to be able to carry out research. And for your dissertation, obviously it's a little bit difficult. That comes with the territory. Don't let it deter you, and don't think that you're in it alone. You have your advisor, you have your colleagues, you have your local collaborators. Use the network, and also just remember to take care of yourself in the process. You are an archaeologist, of course, but you're also a human first. Take care of yourself, work within limits. And by that I mean just, you also have to rest, and you also have to keep in touch with your family and your friends. You have to nourish yourself. You have to eat, sleep, drink water. So, of course, research is important, but don't forget you're also human. So take care of yourself.
And on that note, that's going to do it for today, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. And Arena, thank you so much for being here around the time difference.
Thank you.
All right, take care, everybody.
Bye.